Today I have a good friend, Rabbi Yaakov Menken. He joins the Sara Carter Show today to discuss the latest on Israel and how the Biden administration is responding. By the way, I will be traveling to Israel. Yes, I will. And in fact, spending time there with the Israeli Defense Forces on the border. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that when we get there. We will also cover why Ilhan Omar should have never been on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Should have never been on there. I'll also cover the fallout from the Chinese surveillance balloon that dominated the news cycle the last couple of days in America as it traversed our entire continent, collecting information while the Biden administration watched from the White House. So embarrassing. What is the mainstream media missing about this story, and what does it say about the state of our country? Stay tuned. Hey, everyone, please follow and subscribe. Get all the links at saracarter.com. That is saracarter.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list so that you won't get shadow banned. This is so important. We want to be able to stay in communication with you. So please sign up for the email list, and that way I can send you the latest stories and so much more. Today, we're going to be sponsored by Donors Trust. Donors Trust, I love it. It's a principled, tax-friendly way to simplify your charitable giving. If you guys don't know about Donors Trust, you actually should. You can take control of your charitable strategy. It's donor-advised funds. It's legacy protection for you and your family. It was founded in 1999 with the goal to simplify your giving. It gives you flexibility. More importantly, it gives you privacy in this day and age when it is so hard to find that privacy, especially what we've seen with the FBI, especially what we've seen with the weaponization of our agencies and our bureaucracy, like the IRS. Remember that? Like going after, thank God, the House is now in the hand of the Republicans. Can you imagine if we would have had 86,000 more IRS agents just going after anybody and everybody they opposed politically? That would be pretty scary. So this is about Donors Trust, right? So Donors Trust, you can actually put your money there. When you donate your money, it's private, it's flexible. You'll be impacting the causes that you believe in, whether it's saving unborn babies, empowering entrepreneurs to offer alternatives to failing public schools, or fighting green energy extremists that want to consolidate power. Donors Trust is the charitable giving account provider for you. Let my friends at Donors Trust help minimize your tax liability while maximizing your giving. Visit www.donorstrust.org/Sara. That's SARA. That's www.donorstrust.org/Sara, SARA. www.donorstrust.org/Sara. Thanks so much, guys. And I'm so happy that we're all here today, and we all survived the State of the Union address. So much Biden, but it wasn't a horrible State of the Union address, but it was just riddled in lies. That's the problem. I mean, there were some moments during that State of the Union where I didn't even know what Biden was talking about. When he's like, there isn't a thing on earth, anyone, I don't even know what he was saying, that wants to sit or take over Xi Jinping in China, or run the Chinese government. I have no idea what that man was trying to say. It was just kind of, I was lost to me. It was yelling at me. It was yelling at us, yelling. And what about General Millie Vanilli? What about General Milley? He was like hanging out alongside Biden the whole time. That was so bizarro. It was weird. It was so weird that not only did I notice it, but then I saw a tweet from Miranda Devine over at the New York Post. She noticed it. Other people were putting some really funny memes, about Biden and General Milli Vanilli together. It was bizarre. It was bizarre. But what's even more bizarre than all of that is the Chinese weather balloon. And the fact that some people are trying to, poo-poo this or play it down. And it's amazing how the media just covers for President Biden. Had this been President Trump, the Chinese would be already at our door invading. That's what they would be saying. China is invading America because Trump wants it. I mean, it would be so extreme, the reporting from the left or even from the mainstream media. And I was watching that because I was watching ABC's coverage. I was flipping back and forth, even during the whole State of the Union, just going back and forth, trying to get people's perspective. Like, how is someone watching this, right? How are they reporting this to the American public? And what was so bizarre was, I remember I'm on ABC News, and I can't remember which. It was all the anchors that were talking there. Everybody who was discussing this issue, all the contributors, they were like, oh, Biden, look at how amazing. He's really bringing his game. It's so wonderful to see, and how he really tackles these issues. And they went on to talk about, how he could connect with the African-American community because of what he had to say about the whole story. And if you all didn't hear this, you probably should. But he goes in to say, my kids have never had to have the talk. And the reason I want to bring this up before I get to the Chinese spy balloon is because this is how the media plays everything. They never hold Biden accountable for anything that he ever says or anything that he's ever done. And the fact that he's been in office for more than 40 years and nothing has ever changed, and he's never really done anything to make those changes, and now he's sitting in the White House, is even weirder, because they look at it as a badge of honor. He's been there for nearly 40 years, over 40 years, right? Over 40 years. And I've never had to have the talk with my kids, he says. I've never had to sit down there and tell them to put your hands on the steering wheel. Put your hands up in the air. Don't go for your license, because you probably are going to get shot by a cop. What a liar. Now, have bad things happen to people? Yes. Was I just in Memphis, Tennessee? Yes. Do people lose their lives? Yes. But cops are not bad. All cops are not bad. But the media didn't say, wow, that was really kind of skewed, That was pretty much skewed. Cops do a lot of things. They save a lot of lives. It's the same thing with the Chinese spy balloon. The U.S. military shot down that spy balloon. It was a suspected Chinese spy balloon. It was a spy balloon. It's not suspected. Thank you. Which every story wants to say suspected. It was a spy balloon off the coast of South Carolina on Saturday afternoon. China called the downing an overreaction. Of course, it's an overreaction. China wanted us and everyone in America to see that damn balloon flying over our country. That is an intelligence surveillance capability. They wanted us to see that. You want to know why? Because they want you to know that they have the upper hand. They want you to know, yes, that they have purchased, do you guys know this, over 192,000 acres of agricultural property all across the United States. They want you to know that 300 of those acres is right near one of our most top secret bases in North Dakota, right? Our Air Force bases, where we have a lot of our equipment, our drones. Yes. And thankfully this week, the city council there in North Dakota, in that town of North Dakota, voted down the Chinese company that wanted to build a corn distribution farm industry right there on that 300 acre property right near the Air Force base. Once the people figured out it was owned by China, yes, a company that is connected directly to the Chinese Communist Party, they were like, okay, wait a minute, no. But it's a little too late, because guess what? The Chinese still own 300 acres right near the U.S. Air Base. And let me tell you this. When China does something like this, and we know now because the United States government has let us know, and by the way, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, he said in a statement that President Biden gave his authorization to take down the surveillance balloon as soon as the mission could be accomplished without undue risk to American lives under the balloon's path. BS. They didn't even know what that was. They didn't even know what to do with that. The White House was probably so caught off guard. And where was the platform, right? Where were they transmitting this information? And you know that they were flying these balloons, and they have other spy technology here in the United States. By the way, not just the 192,000 acres of land, agricultural land, that the Chinese government owns in our own country, which is insane. They've got police stations all across our country as well. Yeah, you probably didn't know that. Monitoring Chinese citizens that are living here. Isn't that crazy? And we allow that to happen. And also the technology that I've spoken about on Sean Hannity's show quite often. And it is in our, cellular towers in Montana, which was Huawei Technologies, 5G technology being placed in U.S. cellular towers in Montana, around 150 of our active ICBM nuclear weapons. So just think about that. That's awesome. You shot the balloon down off the coast of South Carolina, but the Chinese are making their way across the globe. The Chinese Communist Party is doing whatever it needs to do to achieve its goal of dominance. They want economic and natural resource dominance across the globe. Minerals, whatever it is, that is what the Chinese government wants. The Belt and Silk Road Initiative. And we just sit here and act like nothing is ever going to happen. Something really big is going to happen. And I think that the fact that the Chinese let that spy balloon capture images from our satellites, probably God only knows what else they use. I've been saying for a long time that I don't believe TikTok is just collecting information. I believe that the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military utilize all of our servers and the power that our cellular phones have as well. They harness that energy. They use that technology themselves. So just having it on your phone, it's not that they're going to spy on you. It's that they're going to harness the energy, combined energy, because of course it is a Chinese-owned connected government company that is embedded inside TikTok. How do we as the American people trust that our government is going to do the right thing? Look at our border. Look at what's happened to our country. Look at what's going on. And by the way, this is a really important story. I want to touch on this before we move on. It's like a wake-up call. And this came from Breitbart, and I've been talking about this myself. China surpasses the U.S. on intercontinental ballistic missile launchers. So Republican leaders on the House and Senate Armed Services Committee said it's a wake-up call. It's been a wake-up call since they've been buying our land. It's been a wake-up call since they've been infiltrating our technology. It has been a wake-up call for some time. Brendan Carr has been on the show. Listen to my podcast with him years ago during the Trump administration when he was saying, hey, somebody better wake up. China is moving in, and it's moving in quick, like a Trojan horse. So let me read this really quick. The head of the U.S. Strategic Command has informed us that China has surpassed the U.S. in the number of ICBM launchers. This should serve as a wake-up call for the United States. Mike Rogers said, great guy, Mike Rogers. Also on here, it is an understatement to say that the Chinese nuclear modernization program is advancing faster than most believe possible. We have no time to waste in adjusting our nuclear force posture to deter both Russia and China. This will have to mean higher numbers and new capabilities. Guys, again, in Montana, where everybody was watching these balloons fly over 150 of our nuclear ICBM silos. I want you to just think about that. 150 of our nuclear ICBM silos. Let me read this. You know that the Chinese government actually declined the Pentagon's request for a secure call between Lloyd Austin and the Minister of National Defense, Wei Fenghe, I guess is his name, after the U.S. military shot down its surveillance balloon. It didn't give a shit anymore. The Chinese knew all along that eventually the United States would take down that balloon. They knew that balloon was going to come down because they used that balloon to provoke that in us. It was purposeful. The Chinese wanted us to see that balloon. The Chinese want us, the Chinese government wants us to know that they are watching and monitoring us. And they want us to believe that they have the upper hand. Do you believe that they do? I personally think they do. I personally think they do. And that's pretty scary. Folks, Allegiance Gold is a new sponsor for this show. And before I get to Rabbi Menken, I want to tell you about Allegiance Gold. Gold and silver allow you to protect what you have worked so hard for, and they will give you back the control and the privacy that you need. I don't need to tell you again, but I will. What happened in Canada? What happened here in the United States? Even Lieutenant General Michael Flynn was threatened with his own bank, saying, you're going to have to leave our bank because we don't agree with you, right? So the banking systems have become politicized. So what do? How do you protect your money? You protect it with Allegiance Gold. And right now you can get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. My friends at Allegiance Gold can help you protect your IRA, your 401k with physical gold and silver, or have it delivered securely right to your door. They will educate you on the benefits of physical gold because they care and want to build a long-term relationship with you. Allegiance Gold has the highest ratings in the industry. Listen to this. 5 stars with TrustLink, AAA rated with the Business Consumer Alliance, and they have an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Get $5,000 of free silver on a qualifying purchase when you tell them that Sara sent you. Don't wait. Call or click today. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, or go to protectwithsara.com. We can't control the Biden administration, folks, but we can prepare. 877-702-7272. That's 877-702-SARA, S-A-R-A, or protectwithsara.com. I'm joined today by Rabbi Yaakov Menken. He is the founding and current managing director of Coalition for Jewish Values. Thank you, Rabbi, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me with you again.
There is so much news. I know. I'm always happy to have the rabbi on the show. I think you're such a brilliant man, so learned, and now there is so much happening. So grateful that the House is now in control of the GOP. And one of the big pieces of news this past week was the removal of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee by Speaker McCarthy. What do you think about that move? And I have a clip I want you to hear in a minute.
Well, what do we think about it? We've been asking for it since the day that she was appointed to that committee, that it was inappropriate. We told Nancy Pelosi so. We asked again a month later because she made her comment about the Benjamin. It's all about the Benjamins.
Right.
Then in 2021, when she managed to compare the United States and Israel, because she's anti-U.S. too. She compares the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban or Hezbollah. They've all done atrocities. It was just incredible. And it was time for her to go. And even her Democratic colleagues called it anti-Semitic. So there was a certain time where you would have thought that everybody would have agreed, of at least of moral character. It is very disturbing, actually, that especially her Jewish and even that other Democrats outside the progressive circle who still have rational thought ought to have voted to remove her. And that's very unfortunate, but at least we got the job done.
Yeah, thank God. At least you got the job done, because I also see it not only her anti-Semitism, which is horrific, and she has no business sitting on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, certainly with the way she has, and I'm going to play some of that. I actually have a clip of Dana Bash going over all of the anti-Semitic remarks so that everyone, including you, Joe Rogan, and everybody else can hear the reality of this. But it's also a national security issue. I mean, this isn't about cancel culture. This is about a position of power in our government where Ilhan Omar is sitting on the House Foreign Affairs Committee and literally is an enemy of the state of Israel, which is our closest ally in the Middle East, and has been openly anti-Semitic. Let's play that clip.
Well, let me ask you, Congresswoman Omar, about what Republicans are saying about you, that there is a pattern of anti-Semitic and other controversial statements that make you unfit to sit on, in your case, the House Foreign Affairs Committee. I'm told that Republicans presented a list in their meeting, in their private meeting this past week. Included in that list is that you said that Israel hypnotized the world. You said Israel is an apartheid regime, that politicians with pro-Israel stances were all about the Benjamins, which you very notably apologized for, that you support the BDS movement, which a lot of people think is rooted in anti-Semitism, compared the U.S. and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban. I want to give you a chance to respond to all of that, which they say is a clear pattern.
Yeah, I might have used words at the time that I didn't understand were trafficking in anti-Semitism. When that was brought to my attention, I apologized. I owned up to it. That's the kind of person that I am. And I continue to work with my colleagues and my community to fight against anti-Semitism. Now, I've never compared or made any comparisons. What I was referencing was a case that was in front of the ICC. And if they want to debate political differences, and that's something that we should all have the opportunity to do so.
How much fighting have you seen her do for the Jewish community, Rabbi?
The removal just means that she's going to do much less damage going forward, because it's not that anything stopped. Her claim that she didn't know that these were anti-Semitic tropes. A trope is a lie. It's this constant belief that the Jews are stealing, the Jews are taking advantage of everybody else. Now it's the Jews are stealing their own homeland from the Palestinians, which of course is a European colonialist name used to detach the Jews from Judea. So now that
occupiers,
the Jews are occupiers of their own homeland, they're occupiers of the Western Wall, they're occupiers of the city of Hebron. Any city from which Jews are ethnically cleansed, it's an occupation if Jews come back. Okay, this is the idea that it's somehow better that she claims she didn't know that these were old anti-Semitic lies. She thought that they were new lies, or she thought that she actually believed these things to be true. Which of these precisely exonerates? Which makes it better? She did not apologize for calling Israel apartheid. She did not apologize for claiming that CARE is a civil rights organization created in the wake of 9/11, when it was created by the Muslim Brotherhood to put lipstick on the pig.
Right, an unindicted, by the way, an unindicted co-conspirator.
For providing material support to the Hamas terror organization.
Absolutely. That's exactly.
This idea that the Jews bought it all off, hypnotized the world, by the way. I don't believe that she read Mein Kampf. I don't know that she knew that she was paraphrasing Adolf Hitler, who said you have to pierce the veil before you can see the truth of the Nazi party and why they're so good for Germany. This is not new material, and that's the point. These are old anti-Semitic lies that are told by people who don't know they're anti-Semites.
Absolutely. But the tragedy here and is the fact that the past is continuously, it's like we haven't learned, right? This type of I guess those anti-Semitic tropes, this type of behavior that we see, and especially when it's an established behavior, and I call that by lawmakers. When you see Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, or others who are anti-Semitic, they openly, I'm just going to say it, I don't believe in their private conversations that they're saying we love the Jewish people. I don't think they're saying, what can we do better to unify us with the Jewish community? I don't believe that. I believe in their private conversations, they are anti-Semitic. and it comes out. It just comes out. But a lot of this goes back, Rabbi, and just, give us a little brief history too, to the propaganda, emanating from Germany and from the prams of Europe, targeting the Jewish people, and people just accepting these lies, these outrageous tropes, these horrific descriptions of people, so that it becomes more acceptable to call them an enemy, to target them. And I think that's what you're fighting against. You're saying, wait a minute, stop. We have to call out the lie as it is, a lie.
Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, in an address to the House of Lords, was dealing, at that time during his lifetime, just a few years ago, they were dealing with a similar problem afflicting the Labor Party under Corbyn, Jonathan Corbyn. Mm-hmm. And he rose in the House of Lords and he said, anti-Semitism or any form of hate takes root in a society when three things happen. It moves out of the fringes to the mainstream of a political party. Number two, that political party, that group, does not face public opprobrium. They don't lose and support as a result. And number three is that those who criticize the anti-Semitism and call out the anti-Semitism are vilified for doing so. Mm-hmm. And we just saw all of those three things happen. This type of anti-Semitism was all of a sudden accepted as a mainstream, quote unquote, progressive Democrat position. The Democrats did not lose public support as a result. And worst of all, when people criticized it and called her out, they immediately went to her identity status as if the criticism of Omar was coming from a bunch of racists. It's because she's a Black Muslim refugee woman. Now, that is as logical as claiming that David Duke is a Black Muslim refugee woman, or that as a neo-Nazi and former Grand Wizard of the KKK, he likes Black Muslim refugee women because he endorsed Ilhan Omar and her comments at the time that she was being criticized for her anti-Semitism, not because of her identity, which he does not like, but because she spouts the same vicious hatred for Jews.
That is such a great way of putting this all together. And it's such an important point because it leads me right to my next question, which is Joe Rogan. And, love Joe Rogan. We see him. He's everywhere. He's kind of the podcast king, right? And he comes on right now, and Joe Rogan, in his last podcast with Crystal Ball from The Hill, and he says he's being accused of anti-Semitism because he actually defends Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, but the way that he does it, and I don't want to judge, but come on, this is what he says. She had said it's just about the money. She's just talking about money, Rogan said on the episode. Now, this is when she talked about it's all about the Benjamins, baby. Remember, she even apologized for saying that because she knew she got caught. I mean, her hate just spewed out of her, out of her mouth. It was just her, it's something you can't control sometimes. You can't hide it. And she says this, and this was in 2019, message about American support for Israel. So Joe Rogan then turns and says on his podcast, well, it's just about money. She's just talking about money, Rogan said on an episode of his podcast, which is on Spotify. I'm going to throw that out there. He said, that's not an anti-Semitic statement. I don't think that is. I mean, it's like, well, wait a minute. Where have you been? I mean, you're supposed to be, Mr. Master of everything, on your podcast, but you're actually pushing forward this anti-Semitic lie about about the Jewish people. I mean, Ilhan Omar tries to hide it by covering it up. Like, oh, it's just anti-Israel. No, it's not. It's not. It's about the Jewish people. So how do you respond to someone like Joe Rogan who's now being accused of just kind of pushing the same kind of anti-Semitism with this. Like, what would you say to Joe if you were on his show? Like, Joe, let me tell you why you're wrong. What would the rabbi say?
It's not fundamentally any different than Ilhan Omar. This claim that the Jews are all about the money, buying support. It was actually his guest, Crystal Ball, who said that it's about the support, the fact that there's so much support for Israel in the United States, which, by the way, is not true. There's all kinds of criticism coming out of Congress of Israel. But this idea, this myth that there's lockstep support for Israel is all based on having to be bought out. That all the congressmen and senators who support Israel are not doing so as a moral position, not because Israel is the one outpost of democracy in that part of the world, not because that is the one place to grant civil rights and a free press and the right to vote, but because they're being bought. And that, of course, is classically anti-Semitic. It's not anti-Semitic to say that Jews make good accountants. By the way, it was Donald Trump who said that the only guys I want handling my money are little guys with yarmulkes. That's a very politically incorrect statement, but it's not an anti-Semitic statement. It's saying Jews are good accountants because the anti-Semite would not trust the Jew to handle the money because he believes the Jew will steal it and use that stolen money to gain power and control. That's what the myth is all about. And that's what they were neatly kind of sliding around and avoiding, as if all they said was that Jews make good accountants, when what they were saying is the Jews are thieves who use their money for power and control. And that comes right out of the Nazis. That comes out of Jules Streicher and Der Stürmer. We've heard this all before. Go right back into European history. That's why the Jews were herded into ghettos. Yes, that word, ghettos, was not made up for minorities in the United States. It was made up about Jews because Jews weren't allowed to have property or even a profession outside the ghetto, precisely because people believed these myths, and they believed the logical reaction was to lock the Jews up in their little cage.
Thank you. Thank you. And also the fact that I can't remember who it was I heard, but I was listening to the radio one day. Maybe it was you, Rabbi. I can't remember. It was months ago that somebody brought this up, and it was such a perfect explanation saying, you know what's interesting is that the Jewish population of America, like as of 2020 or whatever, was like 7.5 or so million, which is roughly like, if you put it into perspective, 2-point-something% of the entire population of the United States of America. And what is so stunning is that you have so much this anti-Semitism that is growing in the country. Like the fact that these people who are anti-Semitic believe that 2.7% of an entire population of a nation is actually like in the back room with controls, paying people off and being like, taking over every industry that's important, is like this crazy lies, propaganda, racism. And they're actually pushing it, just like you said, with this mainstream narrative. And they're doing that, again, by taking our ally Israel, our only really true ally in the Middle East, and making that the cover for their anti-Semitism. Again.
It's called the oldest hatred for a reason. I mean, this anti-Semitism has been around for so long that, I have a book from 125 years ago that goes through these anti-Semitic tropes and says it's just based on the idea that, number one, they hate Jews because they believe that all Jewish wealth is acquired through fraud and deceit. In other words, all Jewish property is stolen property. And number two, they hate the Jews for their religion. But what does it mean they hate their Jews for the religion? That the religion says thou shalt not steal, for example. Because the Jews believe that they are the chosen people and they get to rule over everybody else and manipulate everybody else and steal and desecrate that which is holy to everyone else in order to do their thing. Not only is that book 125 years old and perfectly predicts not only Nazi anti-Semitism, but Ilhan Omar and this whole attitude towards Israel, but he actually pulls it right out of the biblical story of Laban and Jacob. Wow. It's like this goes back thousands of years and we never miss. An anti-Semite always does this same stuff. And now they're using, it is to again paraphrase Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. In the Middle Ages, we said, we don't hate the Jews, just their religion. Then they said, we don't hate the Jews, just their ethnicity. And now it's, we don't hate the Jews, just their nation state. Because everybody uses Israel as a proxy for Jews. And by the way, that's for good and bad. I can't tell you how often I'm in a crowd of evangelicals and some pastor wants to tell me how much he loved his trip to Israel and how much he loved being in Israel. It's a great way of telling me he loves being around Jews without telling me in a really cringy way, I just want you to know I like Jews.
It's like, hey, guess what? I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly.
It's like me walking over to black people. I like black people. I just want you to know that. It's like, oh wow, yeah, that really goes well, doesn't it?
That's pretty awesome. That's like somebody going up to you. I went to Israel, and guess what? The matzo ball soup was amazing.
Exactly. And I'm a Jew from Baltimore. How is it my responsibility how good the hummus was? I mean, it's
it is. It's all your responsibility. Everything good and everything. It's all your responsibility, Rabbi. So that brings me to the next topic, because I know I don't have a lot of time with you, but I want to get to this. I really wanted to do that deep dive, though, because I want to get it into the listeners' minds as to why we are talking this way. And there's nobody else better to explain what's going on than you, in my opinion. But I'm jumping right into what we're seeing right now in Israel. As a matter of fact, the current Israeli-Palestinian tensions, they're on the rise. CIA director is like saying this could be a second intifada. Senior U.S. diplomat, he said he was a senior U.S. diplomat 20 years ago during the second intifada and is concerned. He said, as are my colleagues in the intelligence community, that a lot of what we're seeing today was a very unhappy resemblance to some of those realities that we saw then too. And that's Bill Burns, the current CIA director. What do you think is happening right now? Are you concerned? And that second intifada, by the way, I'm correcting myself. He didn't say this is a second intifada, but he believes this is a rise of an intifada. That lasted from 2000 to 2005. And we have seen an increase in the number of attacks into Israel, and the loss of life has been great. And of course, people on both sides have lost their life. But what do you see happening now?
It's always going back and forth. What we definitely saw is that when people are willing to stand up and speak the truth and say, no, we're not going to have double standards here. We're going to allow Israel to act like any other state faced with an enemy, faced with terrorism. We're not going to demonize Israel for its fight against terrorism. Then you get what happened during the Donald Trump era. Notice that there was all of a sudden, a spark. There was no Hamas major attack by Hamas and bombs and missiles, as there was in 2021 once we had a new president. I don't think that that's fully coincidental. I think that Hamas knew that if they acted the way Hamas likes to act, that Israel would be given free rein. That we would not have a president who is telling them to back off and stop. We have an entire cabal in the media of people talking about proportionality. Why is it that more Palestinians have died than Jews in Israel? And the reality of the situation is that everybody knows that if Hamas would stop firing with guns, bombs, missiles, and suicide bombings, there would be no violence from the Israeli side and nobody would die. The correct proportion while this is going on is every terrorist is neutralized and there are no civilian casualties.
Right.
The problem is, of course, that in this case, the terrorists are using the civilian population as human shields. And at a certain point, there's no way to avoid what armies euphemistically call collateral damage.
Mhm.
Well, there's nobody who does a better job of preventing collateral damage than Israel. But still, when you have people in the West who are blaming Israel for the death of civilian Arabs caught up in the fighting alongside, like what just happened with that journalist. There have been
Right.
2,499 other journalists caught in the line of fire and killed, and nobody knows any of their names. But number 2,500 was shot by Israel as they were in the process of trying to arrest terrorists and were being fired upon.
Right.
And she was caught in the line of fire. No, she wasn't caught in the line of fire. She was deliberately assassinated by the Israelis who suddenly decided, you know what? We're in the middle of a gun battle with a bunch of terrorists, but we're going to stop shooting the terrorists. We want to shoot that journalist over there. That's a great thought. Yeah. Total logic behind that one.
So you're absolutely right. When you have a one-sided media and when you have, and it's so lopsided. And right now, I mean, you have an administration, certainly President Biden, even when he was under President Obama, and we certainly know how the Obama administration handled Israel. It was a very antagonistic relationship. And now we have Netanyahu back in office, which is incredible. So we have a new Netanyahu government. How is that going to work with this Biden administration? I mean, do you see this in any way, shape, or form finding any common ground? Or do you think it's like Israel has to do what Israel needs to do to protect itself? I mean, it's surrounded by enemies, for crying out loud. It's got Iran making growing threats against it. And of course, we're seeing the rise of attacks against its people and against its nation by terrorists like Hamas.
You know, even the American Jewish left is apoplectic about the new Israeli government because it is a strong, pro-values, religious, pro-religion government. The majority of the Knesset members in this new government, in the cabinet under Netanyahu, are religious. There are three explicitly religious parties that joined with the Likud and formed this new majority. And there are, it's interesting, there's a couple members of one of the parties who are not religious, and then there are a couple of members of Netanyahu's own Likud who are. So again, the majority of the members of this governing coalition, the voters in that parliament, are religious people. So it's a pro-religion government, a pro-values government, and also a government that then acknowledges the reality of anti-Semitism and the need to just confront it directly as a fact of life and stop pretending it's something that can be coddled and thus made to go away. This idea that granting the Arab population the ability to set up something called the Palestinian Authority and take on the name Palestinian has, as we see, when it was done in order to make peace and allow the Arabs to be self-governing while at the same time have peace between the two parties. Because obviously Israel cannot make a bunch of people, millions of people, who hate Israel and want Israel destroyed. They cannot make them citizens of Israel because that's called inviting a fifth column into the country and inviting the self-destruction of the country. So they're not going to make these people Israelis. Well, that makes them, that makes the Israelis occupiers of all those people. No, we're going to let those people have their own government and their own governance. And then we're going to have a Palestinian Authority. We're going to make peace with them. The problem with that is, again, this name Palestine comes from European colonialism. Mm-hmm. But for 2,000 years, Palestine meant Jews. We have a Palestinian Talmud, a Palestinian Gaonet, the four holy cities of Palestine during the Middle Ages, Tzfas, Tzveria, Hebron, and Jerusalem. And after all that, when the Israelis throw off the colonialist term and call their new state Israel rather than Palestine, of course, The Arabs pick up the name. The Arab terrorist, Yasser Arafat, picks up the name, dusts it off, and says, we need a Palestinian liberation organization. That, again, was in 1964 when there was no occupation of the West Bank or Gaza. That's the only country, again, with a free press and voting rights and all that, including to Arabs. You have Arabs with the right to vote. It's amazing that this idea, again, both Omar and Tlaib like to call Israel apartheid. It's the only country in the Middle East with both Jews and Arabs in the Supreme Court, in the parliament, in the government, in the universities, in the hospitals, in the media.
Right.
Only country. And that, by the way, is mostly due to ethnic cleansing of Jews from a whole set of countries that they don't call apartheid. So what does it mean that they call it apartheid? It's because it has Jews. Palestinian Liberation Organization. Palestine will be free. Free of what precisely? Answer, Jews.
100%. And that's exactly the same threat we see coming from Iran. You made it perfectly clear what is happening in the Middle East. And by the way, Israel is an amazing nation where women, in a part of the world where most women have no rights whatsoever. You're not going to see that.
The city of Haifa is the refuge for a gay Iranian.
Think about that.
That's where they go. That's where they go. There's a community there of gay Iranians because that's the one place in the Middle East they can go and won't be slaughtered. Literally.
And this
for being gay.
Right. And this is what we don't hear from our lawmakers. This is what we don't hear in the American media. This is what they do not tell us, which is where they hide the truth. And Rabbi, that's why I have you on the show. Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Can I put in one more piece? Because I think it's very important for your audience to hear this because it's really a critical piece. This is about the hate for values. Yes. Hate for Jews is not coincidental. It's because Jews got the Bible first. And that's why they go after first the Saturday people and then the Sunday people. Right. Why do they go after the Jews first and then the Christians? That's why you have, these people detest values. When you talk about traditional values and morality, why is it that the anti-Israel people are also anti-values here in America across the board? Why is it that Ilhan Omar is there claiming to be a very religious woman wearing a Muslim hijab in observance of Sharia law? When in most Sharia law countries, that's where gay people get slaughtered. And she's promoting the LGBTQ agenda under a Muslim hijab. That's logical. Okay, makes sense.
Well, the hypocrisy and the irony.
It's hatred for values, for biblical values, and for tolerance for others. That's exactly where all of this is coming from. And it's not going to stop until Americans stop it, because obviously, you look at the founding fathers and what they wanted to create in this country and how they succeeded in creating a global superpower out of a bunch of rebellious British. It's all about the fact that they decided we're going to pursue values and we're going to have tolerance. We're going to have different religions. We're all going to get along. We're going to let people do their own thing. We're going to have freedoms. And guess what? You look in the Bible, there's a brotherhood of man, peace over warfare. We're going to emphasize education. Nobody's above the law, universal justice, family, charity. That's what they built. It was all about values and all about biblical values. And the people who hate it in Israel, they hate it in America too.
I had a moment where I felt, and I actually thought the same thing as I heard Sarah Sanders, Governor Huckabee Sanders, when she was talking last night in response to the State of the Union. And she talked about values. And it's something that I think every parent, every church leader, or every leader of a synagogue, every rabbi thinks about, because we're living in such upside down times. And I just had a light bulb moment when you said that, because I thought to myself, this is exactly it. This is the battle that we are in. We are in a battle to save values that have been here since the beginning, since God, since the word, right? That we're trying to follow these rules, these laws, these morals, but that's what they're fighting against. They are trying to destroy that. And we've seen that. Rabbi, you are so brilliant. I hope you come back on the show again soon. I know I've kept you from a meeting. You have all kinds of things you're doing today and planning. And I'm so grateful that you made the time to come on the show.
Well, thank you. It's very important to do that. I appreciate being on the show. So thank you.
So that was great having Rabbi Menken in here, and I hope you got as much from it as I did. And I'm very excited about the trip coming up to Israel, and I have so much more to share with you on that, and I'll do that in the upcoming podcast. But before we go today, before we end this podcast, I want to get back to the Chinese company that basically wanted to have a corn mill project in North Dakota, and the fact that the people of North Dakota, of Grand Forks, stopped it. I talk about this a lot. I talk about the fact that we, the American people, have the power to make a difference, that our government works for us. We do not work for them. But we have to take the time to actually educate ourselves and get out there and make those differences, whether that's going to a Grand Fork meeting, to strike down Chinese companies that are trying to build, and we know that they're not just going to build a corn mill, guys, right? You guys realize this. This is not just about a proposed corn mill right next to a U.S. Air Force Base with top secret military equipment and drone equipment within that Air Force Base. No other nation on earth, I think, would allow that to happen but the United States of America. I don't even know how we allowed that to go through. CFIUS should have stopped that from the very, very, very beginning. But here in Grand Forks, or they're in Grand Forks more likely, a 5-0 unanimous vote Monday night from the Grand Forks City Council surrounding the Fufeng Group project. It was met with cheers and chants of people screaming USA. It was Americans taking the power back and saying, no way, you are not going to come into our community. And this was a big deal. This was a big deal because the Chinese-owned Fufeng Group, which describes itself as an internationalized biofermentation products manufacturer. Like, we really want that here. Let's think about what was going on in the Wuhan laboratories and the current investigations that are going to be ongoing with the House GOP members about whether or not they were working on bioweapons, or the fact that I've had Gordon Chang on our show talking about the dangers of the Chinese government and allowing them, again, they have 192,000 plus acres of property in the United States, the Chinese government. And we saw what happened. Our nation, the world was shut down for 2 years. And now you have this group trying to what? Trying to what? Grow corn right near our U.S. Air Base? By the way, folks, our land is a national security asset, right? You know that, right? A lot of people don't think of it that way. But our agriculture is. It's how we feed our people. It's how we keep our animals alive. It is how we, as Americans, have built our nation. It is an asset. It is oil under the ground. It is minerals. There is a lot to this. A lot to this. But listen to this. The company had paid literally $2.3 million to purchase the 300 acres of land just 12 miles from Grand Forks Air Force Base, home to the top secret, I say it again, drone technology. This is a story that was put together on Fox Business, a great story by reporter Greg Norman. Again, my family, the Fox News family. Local officials and federal authorities had warned that Fufeng had deep ties to the ruling Chinese Communist Party. North Dakota's senators released last week a letter they received from Air Force Assistant Secretary Andrew Hunter, in which the military official warned against the Fufeng project. In the letter, Hunter pointed to the proposed corn mill's proximity to Grand Forks Air Force Base as a major risk. This is what he said. Grand Forks Air Force Base is the center of military activities related to both air and space operations. Let me tell you the reason why President Trump created Space Force. One of the biggest reasons he did that was because of China and China's advancements in technology and space. Because, folks, space is not just about us flying to Mars, although I think it's pretty cool what Elon Musk is doing, and I think that will be the future of humanity, is not just getting out there to, put our flag on the moon and walk around the moon or go to Mars or look for aliens, which we talk about on the show quite frequently, because there is something out there that I think technologically we've got to investigate, but it is about owning space. It is about our satellites. It is how our world runs right now. And China is advancing in those fields like nobody's business. And literally, there is a battle in space for that space. That is how important this is. Even more important is keeping the Chinese Communist Party off of our nation's property. Stop communist regimes and adversaries and other nations from purchasing our nation, purchasing pieces of our nation right under our noses, and threatening the national security of the American people. It's common sense, folks. It's common sense, which I have to believe our lawmakers, many lawmakers, lack. So thank God for the good people of Grand Forks, North Dakota. Thank God for the Grand Forks City Council for having common sense. And thank God for the Air Force Assistant Secretary, Andrew Hunter, who, said, whoa, wait a minute, time out, major risk here. We're not going to allow China's Communist Party to sit right next door to our top secret drone base. At least we're not going to let them build that, I think, fake corn fermentation manufacturing business here, because we actually know what they would be doing. They would be setting off a bunch of other balloons to spy on us. Folks, thank you so much for listening to the Sara Carter Show. It's been great being with you. Remember, you can follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on Twitter at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our great nation. And folks, God bless the great state of Texas.